So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're here for a very exciting panel. In fact, I think this is the best panel of the whole conference. So it's called Before Crypto, After Crypto. And I'm David Wachsman, so I'm the CEO of Wachsman, which is the world's largest PR agency for blockchain companies and for companies working on blockchain. And I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of companies that are thinking about doing an ICO, exchanges that, let's say, support the ecosystem, consortia of various different types. But what we're seeing now, and what we've seen actually for a little bit of time, is real companies with real revenues that have decided to go and embrace the blockchain revolution. And they're not doing it in a boring way. So here today are three CEOs of some of the most important companies in what is now financial technology, even if some of them had to take a little bit of time to get there. These are very large companies with significant valuations, and these CEOs have earned their place there. And all of them are actually technically minded, as it turns out. So I'd like to go and introduce you first to Yoni Assia of eToro. I'd like to introduce you to Ted Livingston of Kik, and I'd like to introduce you to Slava Rubin of Indiegogo. So say hello, everybody. So the first question is, why? Why would you take your already profitable businesses that are doing really well, your interesting businesses with millions of users, why would you even consider blockchain? Slava, we'll start with you.
Sure. So we've been around since 2008. We're a funding platform. Somebody would call it crowdfunding. We've done billions of dollars of transaction volume through our network to hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. We send money to 70 countries every single week. What we thought since day one was our mission was to democratize access to capital. At that time, blockchain was not really a word that was used very often, but we did want to get into equity crowdfunding, which was not legal because of the Securities Act of 1933 in the United States. We launched in 2008. We were able to help change the law in 2012 to allow for equity crowdfunding to happen in the United States. That then went live in 2016, and that's when we started researching significantly the blockchain and how we can use that to support funding. Last year, we launched with our first offering, our first ICO, and now we have hundreds of applications, and we're working with lots of companies, small and large. To us, blockchain and crypto is where it is headed. Using hockey metaphors, it's where the puck is going. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. All these transactions will move onto the blockchain, and we think we're very well positioned, having one of the largest marketplaces in the world for entrepreneurs and funders. So we have over 10 million backers and hundreds of thousands of accredited investors that now look at our platform and use it to raise money or to invest.
Fantastic. Well, I think your hockey reference sung home with a Canadian in the room. Ted.
I'm not Canadian.
Tell us, why is it that you decided to embrace blockchain? You had an application, or I'd say a platform that was backed by USV and other top-tier investors. You had raised money at $1 billion valuation. What made you say that you wanted to potentially even disrupt your own business?
I think we just realized we were playing this super unfair game. And if we didn't find a new game to play, we would get killed. So Kik is one of the most popular smartphone messengers in the world, $1 billion valuation, Tencent put in $50 million. We've been building that for almost 10 years now. I was much younger when I started. And along the way, we realized we could build this amazing consumer service, but how do we make money? You know, and when it came to making money, our only option was advertising, which we never loved, this idea of manipulating people to buy stuff that they
like
wouldn't.
Facebook.
Like Facebook. But not only that, but Facebook and Google have monopolies on advertising. And then not only that, if you get anywhere close to them, you get to their scale, that's when they turn on their, evil empire mode, and they turn to copy and crush you. And so we were the first messenger to go viral in 2010, first one to become a platform in 2011, first one to do bots in 2014, and every time they would just copy us and crush us. Do the same thing to us that they're doing to Snapchat with Instagram stories, that they're doing to so many others. And we said, this is, one, it's super unfair, it's bad for consumers, but we can't just sit here and complain, we need a different way. And we realized back in 2011 when we first saw Bitcoin, that might be, for the first time in like thousands of years, a new monetization model for consumer apps, where we could say, hey, instead of trying to extract value through advertising, what if instead we created a new digital asset of guaranteed scarcity, a cryptocurrency, we set some of that aside for ourselves, And then we use our community to grow demand for it, to get them earning and spending in that cryptocurrency. That way, one, we could have a model that allowed us to make money in a way that was aligned with our consumers. We wanted to get them paid so that they could spend, and could be something that we could band together with other developers so that this time Facebook couldn't just copy and crush us.
We'll want to learn more about that later on in the conversation. But Yoni, you have what might be one of the most popular trading websites on the internet. You had how much in trading volume last year?
About $500 billion.
$500 billion. Why would you jump on board this? Well, you have an interesting story, I guess. Maybe we should start there. Tell us how you got initially involved in digital currencies.
So first of all, I'm a finance geek, so I've always loved, so I'm a programmer and a trader. I've always loved the markets. I love the fact that the markets connect people. It's what moves the entire world. So I'm really passionate about trading and technology. And when we started looking at Bitcoin in 2009, 10, it was this aha moment where I initially saw the internet. I realized how this works. Now, this is my business. My business is enabling people to trade in stocks and commodities and currencies. And when I started the business, I assumed that this world actually is digital and connected. And you find out as I built the business, as I built eToro, that finance is a completely analog business, that financial institutions are not really connected, and that it's a lot of manual work and daily processes and manual processes that sort of connect the financial world. And when you realize what blockchain is, it is the reinvention of money. And I think that's fascinating. I think most people still don't comprehend how big of an invention that is. And since then, my board has called me a Bitcoin zealot. And we've been very active within the community, but sort of kept our own sort of business and sort of kept it as a business hobby to deal with the blockchain projects, to finance them. We've set up colored coins.
Well, that I think needs to be said a little bit more than that. You helped, to some extent, invent colored coins.
So we founded colored coins. We coined the term colored coins. And I wrote the white paper of colored coins together with Vitalik. That's quite interesting to understand how the system works. This was like blog posts. I paid people with Bitcoin over Bitcoin Talk to basically write stuff around it. And it sort of forked several times, emerged. Eventually, obviously, Vitalik set up Ethereum, which was mind-blowing and led to everything that happened last year. But for this period between 2014 and 2017, Bitcoin traded on eToro. So we launched Bitcoin a couple of years ago, and only 2% of users of eToro actually traded Bitcoin.
So this is in 2015.
So this is 2014, 15, 16, the beginning of 17. You're talking about 2% and less of traders on eToro trading Bitcoin. Now it's more than 80% trading cryptocurrencies as well as trading other assets on eToro.
That is a gigantic leap.
So what we've seen is basically all of our community sort of fascinated by, inspired by cryptocurrencies. I think our users, which are relatively younger audience, are just extremely inspired by what cryptocurrencies represent.
So Ted, in 2017, which I think seems to be a pivotal year here, you actually launched the Kin project, but you've been planning it for some time. In fact, you've actually been involved in the crypto space for a number of years as well. Do you want to tell us your origin story?
Sure. We were looking for another way to monetize the consumer community for a very long time. We just hated the idea that one day we'd have to go from building for the consumer to like building for advertisers at the expense of consumers. And so when Bitcoin came along in 2011, we realized, holy, like, this could be it. This could be it. Like, imagine we launched our own Bitcoin and we owned a piece of it and we drove demand for it. And I actually went to a Bitcoin conference in January 2012, 6.5 years ago, and Gavin, the lead developer of Bitcoin, was there, and only 11 other people other than myself, so 13 people in the room. And I was banging my fist on the table. I was like, guys, this technology is going to change the world. For the first time ever, we can guarantee the scarcity of a digital asset. But the go-to-market is totally messed up. Like, what consumer is ever going to use this? Because that's what we do. We build consumer apps. We get millions of consumers to actually use something. And oh, but the technology, we just want to talk about the technology. And so I think most of the crypto industry, even to this day, has been going down the technology route. How can we make the technology better and faster? Whereas for the last 6 years, we've been going down the product route, the user experience route. And our thesis was we could use a consumer community to drive demand for a cryptocurrency. You know, you can think of Kik as a little country, a little digital country where millions of people show up every day, where we're the government. And we can say, hey, if you want to exchange value in our little country, you have to use our currency. And so we did an experiment with Kik points back in 2014, seeing if we could make this work. There's no way to buy or sell Kik points. You could only earn it or spend it initially by watching ads and then on smileys. And we got 3 to 10 times the transaction volume of Bitcoin globally at the time. That was just with 2 people working on it in a side part of the app. And we just realized that was sort of our unique position, is we could be the first ones to get millions of mainstream consumers actually earning and spending in a cryptocurrency as a utility. But along the way, we also realized that it could be much bigger, because we realized it wasn't just Kik that Facebook was copying and crushing, it was almost every other developer on the planet. And so let's not put Kik points on the blockchain, let's create a new cryptocurrency called Kin and incentivize all the developers out there to adopt Kin versus launch their own.
Okay,
And so-
I'm buying Kin.
Sounds like a pretty good idea. So Ted, so developers, you say, are embracing this. What other applications can people expect to be built on your platform? Or what will be decreasingly your platform?
So I think this is the really interesting spot we are in, is that with Kik alone, we think we can make Kin the most used cryptocurrency in the world. And so everything is in our power. And you know, one of the things people talk about is, you know, we started with Ethereum, and then we moved to Ethereum, and then we moved to Stellar, then it was Ethereum plus Stellar, and now we just announced last week it's going to be Ethereum plus our fork of Stellar. And everybody's saying, man, these guys are like changing their minds so often. And it's not that we're changing our minds so often, it's that we are learning faster, I think, than almost anybody in the space. I think Kin is very unique in that it's not a technology trying to find a product, it's a product trying to piece together the technology. And so whatever the fastest way we can do that is the way we can put together this ecosystem.
So you're a product maximalist, not a protocol.
I'm a consumer guy. Like, what do consumers want, right? I think like a big problem, and you know, decentralize the world. Like, my mom's like, what does that mean? What does that mean? I just want to use my app. Like, we are not trying to create decentralized apps. In fact, one of my contrarian views is I think decentralized apps are a massive head fake in this space. But we'll see if that plays out. Why? Because centralized Kik is better than decentralized Kik. Centralized Instagram is better than decentralized Instagram. Consumers just want it to be fast and work well. But what consumers do want is they want innovation. They want new and interesting stuff. And this is the problem with the advertising model, and this is the problem with Facebook just copying everything for themselves, is they're destroying innovation. And they're taking everything for themselves at the expense of consumers. And so with Kin, what we're doing, it's not decentralized apps, it's a decentralized currency and a decentralized incentive protocol. You know, you can think of what Bitcoin did for miners, Kin does for developers, to incentivize all these developers to adopt Kin and build interesting ways to earn and spend it. And so I think it's like the exciting thing now is we've shown that we can get millions of people earning and spending in a currency, a new currency. And so now it's been piecing together the technology. We think with the announcement we made last week, we have that first piece now. The next step is to get it launched inside Kik, and with Kik alone, make it the most used cryptocurrency in the world. And then the third and final step is to have the fastest growing ecosystem of apps. So it's not just Kik, but it's live streaming apps, games, all sorts of different apps, all these places where consumers can go to earn and spend Kik.
Well, it's an ambitious roadmap, and you certainly have a platform to start with. But Slava, what do investors want to see? You know, we talked about consumers, and consumers certainly want something that's usable. But investors are looking from a different point of view. What are you seeing? Why did you decide to fully embrace this and start launching token sales?
Yeah, so even going back to regular crowdfunding, there were companies that would do it on their own, just on their own little island. And it was hard for the entrepreneur to be able to get the right exposure, to be able to get the right trust, and to get backers that they would trust the entrepreneur that this is a real site. Fast forward that to equity crowdfunding now, token sales, it's the same thing. There's lots of protocols or lots of entities that are raising money or tokens on their own. And it's always hard for the investor to decide, is this worthy? Is this honest? Is this compliant? Is this a good user experience? Because it's a one-off. The entrepreneur is probably not going to raise money another 10 times in the next week. But on Indiegogo, we're doing thousands of these every month. So we're actually building at scale for the entrepreneurs so they have a great experience, completely compliant, they're getting massive reach, and they know they're going to be able to get a trustworthy experience. Similarly, on the investor side, the investors have a hard time doing all the due diligence on their own. They want to know that there's somebody to help them to navigate. Is this regulatory compliant? Is this a good founding team? Have they gone through due diligence? Is this actually going to pass the SEC rules or potentially other countries' rules? This is actually really valuable information, so your investment doesn't just go poof, like a lot of them have in the last several months. And on Indiegogo, the fact that we have 10 years of experience, the fact that we're so connected to regulatory bodies, the fact that we have 10 years of reviews and millions of people providing feedback, we're not telling you about something that we might build that hopefully will work, that you should speculate that it will have positive results. We just grew revenue over 50% last year, year over year, 10 years in. We are growing. Like, it works. And you come on Indiegogo, like our equity results have shown that over 50% of your funding will come from people you have never met in your life. You have no idea who they are, which is hard for anybody else to say. And the reason that is because they're all trying to build that marketplace now. A marketplace is a very classic model. It's kind of like in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he rides around in the Ferrari, and he says, if you have the means, I highly recommend you get one, right? Well, a marketplace is one of the best business models you can create. If you have the means, I highly recommend you create one. A marketplace model is one of the only models that increases revenue and margin as it grows and gets older, because the network effect keeps on growing and more trust keeps on going into the system. Right now, there's all these blockchain and digital currency type platforms that are trying to create a marketplace from scratch, because the marketplace that does digital currencies and raises money and has investors for this space will do really well. But the thing is, you can't just add money like steroids to a marketplace. It requires time. It's one of those things where you can't just get $1 billion investment and it works. It's equilibrium that needs to be done between supply and demand, which is where we actually have an unfair advantage because we've done that over 10 years.
So you've been diligencing companies and for their token sales before hosting them.
Yep.
You want to have good experience for the initial investors. Yoni, you've been doing to some extent much the same, not with token sales, but you've actually added some digital tokens to your ecosystem, and there's a lot of trading volume. You also have made it easy, similar to what you're doing, for investors to find a pathway to success. Can you talk a little bit about how social trading works and why it might also work with digital currency?
Sure. So I took his advice and bought a Ferrari, or build a marketplace. So on eToro, we basically have a marketplace where everybody on the network can actually see, follow, and copy top traders from all over the world. So what we found out is that a lot of people who sort of get excited about trading actually are looking at what other people are doing, but a lot of time also get a bit tired of trading on their own, and they want to rely basically on other people. And so when you copy someone, you basically look at his entire portfolio, his historical performance, and you copy him, let's say with $5,000, it copies his entire portfolio into those $5,000 in the same proportion, and then every time he trades, it trades automatically in your account. So on eToro, you can actually have an active portfolio of investing both on your own and copying other people. And we've basically created this marketplace where you can see hundreds of thousands of portfolios of people that have been on the platform, some for years, and you can see their track record and copy them. So the idea of social trading is to be able to actually interact with other people, observe them, but also very easily copy them.
So with digital currencies or with tokens, do you think that there's going to be an increasing market for this, or do you think this is simply a parlor game that exists during a speculative frenzy?
Well, I think in general what we saw last year is a lot of people wanted to get into crypto, but really didn't know how. So you got for a period of time, you've had sort of a crypto mania where everyone wanted to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum, but they really didn't know how. Those are not people who knew how to operate a hardware wallet or, keep their secret phrases, and they just wanted an easy access which we provided, but also a way to see that other people are doing it and that they can talk to other people. So I think the social and the ability to connect with other people and communicate with other people is actually intrinsic in capital markets. It's how it should work.
So I think what the main message that I'm getting from what you guys are saying is that millions of people today are interested in cryptocurrencies. Today. How do we make it billions of people? Ted, you've been building products that are intended for that. Let's start there.
Giving away kin would be a great start.
I think that's the biggest question for the industry right now, is how do we actually get consumers to use it? I think when you look at a lot of other projects, they talk about how complicated the technology is, how many PhDs they have, all these things about the technology, and we can never explain it to you, but let us try, it's so complicated. And I just sit there and I listen, and I'm like, but how are you going to get people to use it? And it seems like nobody in the world is focused on that. This is the question that we have been focused on. This is the thing I pointed out 6.5 years ago, is that the world runs on dollars. Like, even to this day, I don't buy a coffee with Bitcoin in it. And it's not a technology problem, it's not a user experience problem, it is a logic problem. The world runs on dollars. And so what we are doing with Kin is, I think we're one of the few projects that's hyper-focused on the go-to-market, hyper-focused on the consumer, and we're not going after the physical world at all. We're going after the digital world. And I think this is the really exciting thing about Kin is, with Kik alone, we can make Kin the most used cryptocurrency in the world. That's going to give Kin potentially a very high value. And then we can take that value and use that incentive. Bitcoin uses that as an incentive to convince miners to burn electricity. Bitcoin gives out $10 million a day to people to burn electricity. We at Kin are saying, that's crazy. Why don't we give that $10 million a day to developers as an incentive to build places for consumers to earn and spend? And not only that, not only can we incentivize them, $10 million a day is billions of dollars a year, but in this new model, when everybody gets a stake, Kik has a stake, and this app has a stake, and that app has a stake, as all these apps get stake, now if Kin goes up in value, all of their stakes go up in value. So now, for the first time ever, they're all incentivized to work together, to share users with each other. And I think this is the exciting thing we see with Kin, is not by focusing on the physical world, but by focusing on the digital world, we can get tens, hundreds, billions of consumers all transacting, using, not for speculative value, but for real utilitarian value in a cryptocurrency for the first time ever. And that's our mission. That's what we're focused on, Kin. We want to be the most used cryptocurrency in the world. And how are we doing it? We're focused on the digital world. We're starting with Kik, and then we're setting up the incentive system to pull in more and more and more developers.
So that's a cryptocurrency, and hopefully billions of people do use it. But security tokens seem like they might be the future. You've been working with the SEC and other regulators for a very long time, Slava. And equity crowdfunding had so many wonderful attributes to it, but it didn't seem to ever really take off in the public eye. I'm sure your site was one of the only ones successful on the internet. How do you see security tokens changing the game?
Yeah, so going back, the idea of being able to have a common person who's not a rich accredited investor be able to invest in something without an IPO wasn't allowed since 1933. That law was then signed to change in 2012 with President Obama, and we were there to help create that law. We lobbied as part of their entire process.
This is the Jobs Act, right?
The Jobs Act, exactly, and it took 4 years before it was implemented. Now, one way of looking at it is some of the rules, the exemptions, there's this thing called Reg CF, which has like $1 million cap, regulation crowdfunding, or you have like Reg A+, which is like $50 million cap. We don't have to get too much into all the rules, but the point is, before these exemptions existed, there was no option except for being a rich person with a private deal or an IPO. Those were your only two choices. And that really made it tough for a lot of younger companies to be able to raise capital. I think the fact that we have Reg CF with $1 million cap as of 2016 is great. Is it by itself great? It's not, but it's a great starting point. And I feel very confident that if you look at the internet, let's call it 1995 when the internet became interesting, and now it's 20 years later, it's hard to remember the fact that Netscape was considered a huge result, and it was like $1 billion company. That was like the exit. Now we look at that, it's like, really? So if you look 20 years forward from last year or 2 years ago, there's going to be massive changes and massive results. So if you kind of, again, see where the puck is going, I think these caps are going to get raised by the government. I think the world is going to allow for more exemptions. And it's going to be really interesting because a lot of why the attraction to these concepts called utility tokens, which are really just non-security tokens, tokens that don't have to follow security regulations, is exactly that. They just wanted to get around the regulations. But if you can actually make the regulations a little more loose and allow for more trading to happen and more liquidity, more transparency, even within the regulations, there could be very exciting things that happen. We do believe that's where at least 90% of the tokens will go, under securities exemptions. Right now, that's not the case. It's like nearly 100% non-security. But the writing is on the wall from Q1 where the SEC and various governments started to show like, whoa, 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 2017 was fun, but that's over, right? And where all this is going to head in a few years is I'm quite confident it's going to be a security token discussion. Does that mean there won't be some sort of non-security framework? I think there will be something. I think it'll be quite challenging to fit in that, and it won't be nearly as fun to just be speculating on those things to happen. So I think there's a massive market to be had in security tokens. We're ripe in terms of positioning for that, since we've always been the compliant ones. We've always navigated white hat. We've always done it in a way that fits within the regulatory. So over 10 years, we have no black check marks against us. And that's the sort of thing that entrepreneurs and investors look for. And going to your question that you asked him, which is, I completely agree that right now it's a lot of talk about tech. And there's no question that the tech is what makes it exciting one day in the future. You know, they created electricity. At that time, they thought it was awesome. But it was really geeky, and it took years before you got a TV. But then when you get a TV and light bulbs and all that, that's consumer-facing applications. There will be these consumer-facing applications that makes all of these distributed apps or digital currencies or any of these blockchain-supported functionalities awesome. And my mom, who actually does use some internet, but not a lot, will use blockchain, not tomorrow, but maybe a decade from now. And as these things are created, all of these companies will need to get funded. And they probably will start on security token first. And it'll fit within regulatory environment.
But why security tokens, for instance, and why not just simply doing an equity crowdfunding the way you did last year or 2 years ago?
Oh, sure. So just being able to do equity crowdfunding itself, or any trading, has its own inefficiencies. So being able to have this all in one place, potentially having, being able to trade very easily, as opposed to the opaqueness or the limitations in terms of liquidity. Right now, one of the challenges of having one of these small equity crowdfunding companies is how are you going to find somebody else that actually wants to trade this? It's quite complicated. Being able to do this on the blockchain speeds that up. Be able to have more of this in the smart contracts in terms of maybe this person is allowed to trade this, but not for a year. So right now, you have somebody to check. You even said you were checking passports when you were doing your deal, right? Which is like, did they actually have an official passport? That's not digital, right? So imagine you have this in the actual token. And it says, this cannot be traded till next week, so no. And you don't need a person to look at that. The software can know that. So these are the sorts of things that when you layer this into the security tokens, can make it lower price, more liquidity, smarter. What I don't believe in is people think, oh, security token, I couldn't raise $1 for my pizza shop yesterday for equity crowdfunding, but if you put it on a security token, $1 billion valuation. Like, that I don't believe in at all, but there is a delta of being able to improve the entire market. It's kind of like you used to do auctions at Christie's, and then eBay came around. It doesn't mean that the thing that couldn't sell at Christie's was all of a sudden going to go for $1 billion on eBay, but it opens up a bigger market, it's smarter, it's faster, it's more efficient. It's just the next version of technology.
So you've been taking a look at the next version of technology for a very long time. You've also had to go and play nice in 140 countries where eToro is used today. How are you looking at both landscapes simultaneously and navigating that minefield?
What, securities regulation and crypto regulation?
Sure.
Like porcupines make sex slowly and carefully. We try to educate, we talk a lot to regulators. We try to not to educate them, because that's a bad word to say, but we try to teach them about crypto. I think a lot of people still, I had a meeting with a central bank, and at some point of the meeting I had to ask if somebody has a computer sciences degree in the bank, and nobody had. So I think there's a very big transition, because regulators and central banks and sort of a lot of times come from sort of accounting principles, from audit firms, and the whole idea of financial services. So is that bureaucracy was actually the innovation of financial services. So if you realize that you have bureaucrats that are able to do things really organized, that led to people being able to trust banks. Because banks are basically just ledgers, right? You just need to trust the bank to keep the ledgers right and not to cheat, right? That's why the banking industry in very organized places like the US and the UK are very successful because people trust the system because there's a very good and efficient form of bureaucracy, which was sort of the invention of modern financial services. And now this replaces it completely. So this replaces this bureaucracy and procedures with the blockchain, with something that's mathematical, and you really probably do need, you know, some knowledge in computer sciences to understand how blockchain works. And that's a very tough bridge to pass, and it will take some time before it does. But we do definitely see a lot of regulators who understand that better and are looking at blockchain as a potentially a solution because they would love to get that level of transparency from the existing financial services companies. So if you're looking at, then I 100% agree with Slava, if you're looking at the next 10 years, we're probably going to see something in the $50 to $100 trillion of assets moving onto the blockchain. So you're going to see digitization or securitization or tokenization of a lot of different asset classes, whether it's startups or real estate or these new tokens coming up or stuff like gold, silver, and oil. Everything is going to be eventually moved into public ledgers or if the big banks have their way to their permissioned ledgers, but that's almost an inevitable process.
So, you know, you talk about billions or trillions of dollars being moved onto the blockchain, but you also said how hard it is, that today you might need a computer science degree or at least a really sophisticated understanding to embrace this. Well, it so happens that the three of you are very technically minded and perhaps prescient CEOs. But how is the rest of the Fortune 500 and every other company on earth supposed to embrace this technology if it's this hard? Is it possible?
Yeah, you can buy companies with very successful, smart, technical people if you're a Fortune 500 company. That's a nice shortcut.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, some of these very smart Fortune 500 companies are just now starting to go direct to consumer with the internet, right? That's why they're buying Dollar Shave Club and these other companies. I mean, that's 20 years later, right? So I'm not sure that any of them move overnight. That said, I'm shocked at how quickly, as soon as we announced our entry into the blockchain ICO crypto space, that we already have an enterprise business independent of that, which is we do work with the largest Fortune 500 companies, helping them with innovation and bringing validation to new ideas. How many started, quote unquote, ringing the phone? And obviously we don't have a phone, but I mean, just getting in contact with us.
You don't have a phone?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of demand, a lot of interest, not to change their entire company, but to start figuring it out. You know, also you see Facebook creates a blockchain group, right? Everybody's figured it out that this is not going to be gone. It's a matter of how will this affect my company. And I do think that we will even be surprised in this room at how many announcements will probably come from Fortune 500 companies by the end of this year.
Yeah.
And it probably sounds like, oh, by the end of this year, like, that's a long time away. But in corporate speak, that's like tomorrow, right? 2 quarters, barely more than 2 quarters. They're already working on this, and there's going to be some announcements, nevertheless, in the next few years. So I'm actually quite impressed at how much these companies are, like, most of these executives are already, one of the first things they talk to me about is blockchain. Not in a what is it. It's always like, I need to know what am I supposed to do for my company, and how is this going to like destroy my company, or how do I get ahead? Which is interesting because then you have to start deploying R&D dollars and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable how different the companies that approach our firm are on an everyday basis. We vet something between 5 and 30 businesses a day, and now we're actually starting to see real businesses today.
I think companies saw how slow they moved because they didn't know internet was going to be real, and they're like, we probably don't need to believe in this, and they saw how much they got punched in the face, and now they're seeing it all over again. And a lot of those executives is, I lived through failing with the internet. I don't want to fail again as bad.
Yeah, it's actually happening relatively fast. So Kik was definitely the first sort of social app going ICO, and then Telegram did it, and then suddenly Facebook are building a blockchain team. So that's definitely a way to get to mass market. Facebook could do an airdrop to 2 billion people. That's a very nice airdrop. So it's definitely going to get there. We just don't necessarily know exactly the path, but we know two things. One, a massive airdrop. It will happen probably in the next 3 to 5 years, or 1 billion people suddenly getting crypto into their wallet. And second, when Bitcoin rallies like it did in December, we already saw what happened. You had people standing in lines of ATMs everywhere around the world. When that rally happens again and suddenly Goldman Sachs are able to take $50 and $100 million trades, and there are more institutional desks, and all of the billionaires start asking the question, okay, should now I go into Bitcoin? Then that will probably also bring a lot of new users into crypto.
Well, I have you guys here, and there's probably a lot of people out there wondering, I'm a business owner. How do I embrace blockchain? You've all been asked that question. What do you tell them? What's your best piece of advice, Slava?
I mean, every company, every industry is different. I think people should start doing their research, start looking at competitors or case studies that feel somewhat close to them and start to understand how they're doing it. I also would try to understand what your consumers and what your customers want, and then how potentially blockchain can influence that, and see how you can start exploring it. I think it's what he was saying. I think you need to service your customer and figure out how this new technology can improve that experience. This is like a tiny example, and this is not to speak to one company or another, but we went from like one payments provider, like one transaction payments provider, to now we use Stripe. So for all intents and purposes, it's the same experience, but we just think it's better, right? And our customers think it's better. So you can say we went from a little bit of an older technology to a newer. That's partially our opinion. But similarly, you have your current experience with your customers. How can it improve or become better that you are not servicing because of the blockchain?
I'm sure you're asked all the time, Ted, should I do an ICO? What do you tell people?
So I think I'm a little bit contrarian here, which in 99% of cases, I say you shouldn't. I think most of the applications that people are hypothesizing about blockchain today are going to turn out to be pixie dust, and there's nothing actually there. I think supply chains on the blockchain, I think audits on the blockchain, you know, there's still trust somewhere in the system. Yeah, we don't have to trust the database, but we have to trust the people putting the information into the database. I think the bigger question is, what is the killer application of blockchains? And this is a question we like to ask at Kik is, you know, when you look at the big shifts in technology, the once-a-decade shifts, you can start to see some patterns. What did the technology shift enable that was never possible before? And in there, you will find the killer apps of this era. You know, the internet was all about information. I can get information from anybody in the world. So what did we get? We got a massive product information site, a massive social information site, and a massive factual information site. With mobile, it was all about communication. I never go offline. So we got massive picture sharing communication, we got massive text sharing communication. Yeah. So what is it about blockchain that we can do that was never possible before? And my answer to that is we can build global trustless cryptocurrencies, medium of exchanges between parties, and we can get millions of people to work together to build them. And I think, like, when I look at Bitcoin, right, I think Bitcoin is amazing, but I think ultimately Bitcoin, just my personal bet, will ultimately the value will go to approximately zero.
Well, I'm sure the traders on his platform might disagree.
I'm willing to take that bet. I said it back 7 years ago to Gavin.
There we go, guys. Bet's happening right now.
Bet.
It's being recorded.
10-year bet. I'll take it.
I'll
bet you a
10
million.
Bitcoin. 10 Bitcoin.
All right.
Really, 10 Bitcoin?
10 Bitcoin.
I'm not a betting man. I'm not a betting
He
man.
said 10 years, 10 Bitcoin goes to
You heard it
zero.
here first, ladies and gentlemen.
I will say the contrarian thing. I will say the contrarian thing. We're the first app in the world to go viral as a chat app, the first one to be a platform, the first one to do bots, and the first ones to do cryptocurrencies. The problem with Bitcoin is it's trying to compete with a world that runs on dollars. And the question is not who can get to the technology first to build a global currency, the most used currency in the world. If Bitcoin was used by 1 billion consumers every day and not just speculated on by a few million, what would it be worth?
Well, we might need faster transaction times. And before
But
we
I
conclude,
think that's the problem. I want to finish. That's the problem with the way this industry thinks. It's all, if only we had faster transaction times, if only we had a better wallet, if only the go-to-market is wrong. If only we had a better go-to-market. And I think that's what we are focusing on with Kin. That's what Telegram is going to focus on. And that is what Facebook is going to focus on. And in there, we will find the massive opportunity.
Yoni, any hints on what you're going to be saying in a couple hours here at Consensus?
You told me that I'm not allowed to break my embargo.
So there you go. He's not allowed to tell anyone.
But if you come at 5:45, you'll hear a lot of very cool announcements from eToro. At least 3 big announcements from eToro on stage today.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first, guys. We have
And
a bet
Slava
between
witness.
these two. And he's the witness.
Witness to the bet.
There you
All
go.
right, thanks,
They'll be
everybody.
worth nothing, so it's fine.
Yes, I know. Let's shake hands again.
Thanks, everybody.